thank you for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, it's exciting. I gotta say, I remember hearing a podcast with you a while ago. I mean, it might have been 2 or 3 years, and full candor, I hadn't heard of you before, but you started talking about, because I wasn't exposed to the I hope they serve beer in hell type version of you. My first expose to you was like the sovereignty, the homesteading, and just struck me immediately. Sent it to my brother and my dad. We're like, okay, yeah, this is awesome. So it's cool to be full
That's what
circle.
I was doing this morning, was planting trees on my ranch. I'm dead serious. You can tell my hands are still dirty. Yeah.
Going straight to Jiu Jitsu after that?
For real. I planted mulberries, straight to Jiu Jitsu, and then here.
That's a pretty good day, I'd say.
Not bad.
But it's just cool to be full circle, having you here, being able to talk. It's I think of all the people I've had on the podcast, you might have had one of the more interesting, like, life transformations, I would say. Yeah. And I've never asked this question before, but I was thinking about it on the way over here. So if you know who Will Harris is from White Oak?
Yeah, of course.
So
I've been to White Oak.
Yeah, so I went down there as well and had him on the pod, and I was thinking, if I asked him this question, the question is, do you think that like 20-year-old you would be surprised by where you are now? Because I feel like Will Harris would be like, oh no, not at all, because I'm was born on a ranch and here I'm a rancher.
Not really. No, actually not at all. 20-year-old me definitely wouldn't. 27-year-old me, you gotta remember, I'm kind of a late developer in all ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like 27-year-old me might be a little bit surprised, but all 27-year-old me would be surprised is that I don't really care about drinking and hanging out anymore, right? Like, because it was like my favorite thing to do at 27. Get drunk, pick up girls, hang out with my friends, like have fun. Like I just couldn't imagine at 27 I would ever want to do anything else. And now it's like the idea of like going to a bar and drinking is like, ugh. Like nothing against that. If someone wants to drink, cool. Yeah. Like I have, you know, the only alcohol I have in my house, I mean, I have a lot, but it's all very expensive wine, right? Like that's it. Yeah. I don't have beer. I don't have really anything else. I have a little bit of cider, real high-end cider. That's about it. And
next
so,
book
like,
is I hope they serve wine in Dripping Springs.
Dude, I mean, like that's for, like the only thing insured in my house is my wine collection. That's it.
That's wild.
And so like, yeah, no, 20-year-old me wouldn't, because if you think I'm married, kids, live on a beautiful ranch, you know, I'm not basically retired, you know, like 20-year-old me be like, yeah, I should be that way at 48. Fuck yeah. You know? The biggest surprise 20-year-old me might have is that 48-year-old me doesn't give a shit about a lot of things that 20-year-old me thought were really important. Like external Western definitions of success, money, power, things like that. I'm long past that, but 20-year-old me was not. Like I was, you know, I mean, I was an idiot at 20. So what did I know?
There's a quote that I love. It's, if you don't think yourself 3 years ago as an idiot, you're still an idiot. So even more so 20 years down the line, you know?
Oh yeah.
That's fascinating to me. Do you have, I just love learning about stories. Like I'm much more curious about people's stories and like even like concepts and ideas.
Right.
Did you ever have growing up, did you think about sovereignty? Did you think about homesteading or ranching, or did you have that because you're from the Northeast?
Yeah. No. I'm from not at all.
Oh, you're not from Northeast?
No, I'm from Kentucky.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, I know. I don't have a Southern accent, but no, I'm in no way. I didn't even go to. I could have. I didn't go to school in the Northeast. I hate almost everything about most areas in the Northeast. Like it's a big debate to me, which is the worst hellhole, Boston or Philadelphia, and New York's number 3 for sure. But I didn't understand sovereignty because I didn't have a mature, experienced understanding of the world. The way I thought about I've always cared about freedom, the ability to do the things I want to do. Those sorts of ideas mattered to me, or those concepts. But I thought about them in relatively immature ways. And I mean like immature in the long scale, like not, I thought about the way that most people do, you know, like I want freedom. I didn't understand that freedom is essentially a grant from another party. Sovereignty is a decision you make to only answer to yourself, right? Freedom a lot of times doesn't require responsibility. It may be, maybe not, depending on how you define it. Sovereignty always does, right? Sovereignty means you are taking full responsibility, or responsibility for your own life. And those are very different concepts. Sovereignty is a man's version of freedom, right? And it took me a long time to mature enough to understand not just those ideas, but to really understand what responsibility meant. Like, it's easy to think you're responsible. It's a different thing to get up in the morning and feed the chickens and plant the trees and water the garden or whatever the hell you have to do, right? It is a very different thing to decide I'm going to take the harder road so that I get to be in charge of my life and then really understand what that means,
There's
and then do it.
Kara and Jeff Smith from Colorado Craft Beef, which is a ranch out in Colorado. I was talking to her and she said, I love this. She said about ranching and about responsibility that cows need to be fed on Christmas.
Right.
It's the same idea. It's like everybody wants the freedom or the sovereignty until it's snowing
They realize
sideways.
the price.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How did you think that because you made the transition pretty quick.
Man, listen, the reality is most people don't want sovereignty. They choose safety, security, stability. And the price of safety, which is always an illusion, but I should say the price of the illusion of safety and security and stability is a lack of sovereignty. You don't get to decide most parts of your life, if any. If you want to really make your own decisions about your own life, then the amount of the amount of responsibility you're going to have to take for your own life is essentially, it's a near 1-to-1 correlation. You want full control over your own life, you got to take full responsibility for your own, and that's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to even conceive of it because we live in a world where everything is designed around convenience, around control, around giving you the illusion of choice without the actuality of choice, right?
So one of the things I remember you saying in whatever podcast it was you were living in Austin and you were like walking with your family it was a while ago, but you were like walking with your family or something. You had some interaction in your neighborhood that you were living in and it was kind of like, it was like a light switch. Does that sound familiar?
I mean,
the question is really just like, did you have a switch?
Yeah, so no, there wasn't really a switch. I think I know what you're talking about. This was more for my wife than it was for me. But my kids, I got 4 kids, and they're ages 2 to 9. And all little kids, I shouldn't say all, actually, without the undue influence from parents who are racked with shame, pretty much all little kids like being naked or lightly clothed, especially in summer in Texas, right? Mm-hmm. And so we were living in Barton Creek, which is it's a fancy neighborhood here, but it's all shitty McMansions. And we're walking around, we're on a walk, and my wife had a bikini or whatever. I mean, it was hot out, like Lululemon nonsense, and I had shorts, and my shirt was off. I think we had 3 kids at the time. We did, because our 4th was born out and dripping on the ranch. And one was in a stroller, and the 2, they were like 5 and 3 or something. And they were both, I'm pretty sure they were both stark naked. And at least the littlest one was for sure. The 2 or 3, she was 2 or 3. And this woman drove by and lost her fucking mind. Like, this is like a gated community, right? So it's not like, we're traipsing, I mean, we're like a 3-year-old girl's naked walking in basically a private, semi-private community. This woman lost her fucking mind, called CPS, all this nonsense. Yeah, for real.
Called CPS.
Right. Took pictures.
Taking a family walk.
Took pictures. I made the problem go away because I'm like, you understand you have child porn on your phone right now. I'm calling the sheriff. And she was like freaked out. And then the whole problem went away. But the fact that this lunatic woman, who obviously has some serious mental health issue with a naked child, or she probably suffered some horrible trauma, doesn't remember it, pushed it away, won't accept it, whatever. And so now, like, is dumping it on some poor little innocent kid. And my wife, that was when my wife was like, what the fuck? Like, I can't be around people like this. And I'm like, I know, I'm with you. That was for her, the big triggering event. For me, the triggering event, if there was one, I mean, the God's honest truth is my wife and I knew we wanted to get on land for years. And then in January of 21, I did ayahuasca for the first time. It was a small part of the journey, but basically the medicine was like, you've been saying you want to get on land. Why aren't you? And I'm like, I don't know. And it was like, well, and I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, and that was it. Like, it was a very small part, but I went home and I'm like, why aren't we on land? My wife's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, let's just sell our house and go buy land. She's like, okay. And then 6 months later, we're out in Dripping. Yeah.
The rest is history. I have a buddy who lived in Virginia Beach, and he was talking to his wife one day about like, man, he went to Montana and was like, it would be so cool to be out there. She was like, it would. And he like kind of,
why aren't we?
And yeah, he's like, wait, is that an option? And she's like, yeah. And so they just picked up everything and moved. It's just kind of, you're confronted sometimes with
I would love to live in the Mountain West, but my wife hates the cold.
Oh yeah.
So that's not an option.
It's tough. Have you guys spent time out there?
Yeah.
I love Montana and Texas are probably my two favorite places in America, maybe the world.
Yeah.
There's a lot of correlations too. But what was the process like for you in terms of, because the way I interpret it, correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of went like 0, living in Barton Creek, to 100, having your own more or less sovereign ranch, owning your food, water supply.
Yeah.
I heard you say you have a gun range on your property.
Two. Pistol and rifle range. Sure.
Yeah, so two gun ranges on your property. That's like more or less, and this is what, 5 years ago?
No, 2.5.
This is only 3 years?
Yeah, less than 3 years. October of this year will be the 3-year anniversary.
So, wow, that's freaking awesome.
I'm not one of those people who, when I make a decision and go, I tend to go, right? And so like, we decided January of 21, sold our Barton Creek house March of 21. We didn't find the place we were looking for until July of 21. We got on it October of 21. So it's been 2.5 years. And we've transformed the place, man. It was kind of nice when we got there, but it took a lot of work. And it was so funny, man. Like, my buddy works on race cars, like high-end race cars. And he came out to visit and he goes, like, you know, like have a normal stuff you would have on a ranch, like a tool, a workshop, and all this. And he goes, dude, you didn't have a screwdriver 2 years ago. He's like, you have a planer and a joiner and like a floor jack. Like, you don't even know what the floor jack is. I'm like, I do now.
Yeah, because you had to.
Right. Because I had to. I mean, listen, I could have. You can always hire people to do this stuff. But for me, it was like, if I'm gonna be. Listen, no, I'm not sure anyone's 100% sovereign, but I'm going to try and have as much control over my life as I can, right? And so if I'm serious about that, then I have to know how to do things. That's taking responsibility, right? And so, bro, the last 2.5 years have been the most challenging in my life in terms of feeling stupid. Like, I wake up, I've gotten to a decent level at this point, but for the first year, for sure, 1.5 years, I would wake up and like I would feel like an idiot because I'd have to watch an hour of YouTube videos to know how to do something that like the dudes hanging out in front of Home Depot looking for day labor are really good at.
Yeah.
And could do in an hour with no problem, right? Like, I didn't know anything.
And you're coming from like 2 degrees and all this stuff. Like, you're
right.
intellectual guy.
I'm really good at certain things in the world, skills that a lot of people consider high status and fancy. And like my buddy, I didn't know what an impact driver was. I'm like, wait, that's different than a drill? And the Home Depot guy kind of looked at me. He's like, where have you been the last 10 years? I'm like, bro, I've been reading and writing and on computers. Like, I'm not making shit.
Yeah.
But now, like, I'm not good by any means, but I'm at least functional with tools and building. And, I can put down fence and I can do PVC and like the most basic stuff. But like, I couldn't do any of it 2.5 years ago. And then now I've actually gotten these, like I was planting trees, like knowing permaculture and regenerative agriculture and what to plant, where to plant, understanding water and all that stuff. Like, there's a whole universe of stuff and it's awesome. But you're right. The result is now I have my own two owned water supplies, rainwater capture and well. We have essentially, we can be food independent if we want. Like we have sheep, we have chickens, we have all kinds, I can process it on the place. Like, beef is right down the road from a different guy. But like, of course I go to the grocery store. Like, why would I not use stuff? But I don't buy any meat at stores anymore. The industrial meat supply is absolutely poisoned and corrupt, and I would not eat anything at a grocery store. I only eat sometimes at restaurants just because, like, if it's a great restaurant, it's like, all right, well, I'm gonna have a little trade off for the flavor or whatever. But that's like once a month. That's it. Like, I don't eat out anymore. And then I just put in 3 orchards this year. So within 2 years, we should be able to be essentially food independent if we wanted to be.
What
right?
are the orchards, out of curiosity? Like what?
They're fruit orchards, but there's not, you can actually grow a lot in Texas if you can decently irrigate, right? Which we can, because I'm not irrigating, 8,000 acres. I'm irrigating like 2 acres.
Yeah.
So it's not too hard. But we have basics, all the stuff that grows in Texas: peaches, cherries, pears. There's actually a lot of cherries that grow well, just not the grocery store varieties. Some apples, pomegranates grow great here. Figs grow great here. Plums grow great here. Mulberries, all like blackberries. I think I said grapes. We got tons of grapes. Kiwis, actually. Dude, kiwis are like the cold hardy variety, not the fuzzy stuff you get. That's a whole nother world too. Like, I don't know if this is interesting to you. It's super interesting to me.
All this stuff.
Like, dude, when you start to dive into fruit, just fruit. Like, I don't like growing annuals. So, like squash, you have to plant every year. I hate it. Perennials, I love. Like, you put it in the ground, you do it right once, you water it, you get it established, and you essentially don't have to mess with it again, aside from, a few maintenance things. That's what I like. I want the asset in. I'll work hard to get it in and get it going, and then I don't want to have to fuck with it all the time, right? Whereas squash, you got to pay attention to it the whole time. It's the worst. Yeah. But and then also squash is terrible. Whereas like pears are awesome. Like fresh pears are amazing. There are like almost every fruit you can imagine. There's, if not dozens, hundreds of varieties that are incredible that you will never get in a grocery store because they don't work with the industrial commercial food system, right? Like, I mean, God, there's examples out the ass. My favorite example might be kiwis. Like you have those fuzzy ones, right? And those are they're kind of the shittiest kiwis that are grown. They're sold in grocery stores because they ripen when you take them off. They're hard. They don't get bruised during transport, all that stuff. Like there's all these other kinds of kiwis that like you basically can't transport, that have to ripen on the vine, that like are really a pain in the butt if you're not eating them right there. Well, I'm eating mine right there. And you grow them sort of like grapes on these trellises. After about 3 years, one kiwi vine, like the Anna or the Geneva or the MSU varieties, will produce 100 pounds of fruit. And it's way better than grocery store kiwis. And they're kind of like big grapes, and you can just eat them like grapes. The first time I had this, I'm like, the fuck is this? Like, this is not a kiwi I've ever had, right? Yeah. And then a buddy of mine has a really good, like a mature orchard. And bro, pears off the tree are like insane. Like a fresh.
Never had one.
You've never had a fresh pear at a grocery store because you can't, because they're so soft and they bruise. Yeah. So they have to pick pears like 3 weeks before they're ripe, and then you get those hard. Those aren't pears, man. That's I like, it's hard to believe how amazing fruit is and how many varieties there are when you're able to just eat it off the thing, when you don't have to transport it anywhere. And so if you were to like my orchard, I could walk you through it and be like, oh, well, this is this. You probably have heard of nothing in there. Because I hadn't heard of. Our apples are Golden Dorset, which I think you might sometimes be able to get in grocery stores. I don't think any other kind.
I'm a Honeycrisp guy.
You can grow Honeycrisps in Texas, really? Which I didn't know. Yeah.
So on that note, like, isn't there some, I don't even know if it's a conspiracy at this point or if you would consider it that, but isn't there aren't seeds contained right now?
Dude, that's a whole separate thing. Yeah. So I'm not an expert in this world, but my understanding is that, like most fruit is graft, but most commercial seeds, like for industrial agriculture, and they're owned by Monsanto or whatever, and they have the genetic patents, and then so they work with the pesticide. Like, that's a whole separate world. For small scale orchard type agriculture, you can still get like organic,
Okay.
like real seeded stuff. It's no problem. And then there's whole, like, have you ever heard of a pawpaw? You have no idea what that is, do you?
I call my that's
what you call your grandpa.
Yeah, I was gonna say papaws.
No one knows what a pawpaw is, hardly. Pawpaw is, it's basically, it's called the American banana. It was probably it's the only tropical style fruit, I think. A passion fruit is actually native to North America. One type, which I'm growing a bunch of, and it's awesome. It's amazing. You never find that in grocery stores. And then I put in a whole separate pawpaw orchard, like 8 pawpaws. And it's essentially like a mix of it has a custardy texture like a banana, but it kind of tastes like a mango apple mix.
Really?
And they're amazing. And they used to be, everyone in America, like our great grandparents had pawpaws in their backyard and whatever. They don't work at all with the industrial ag system because like they have to ripen on the tree. And then like you basically have to like let them fall off the tree and you got to eat it within like 8 hours or whatever. But like in that one window of ripeness. There's been this whole underground community of guys like that have kind of created all these new cultivars and but they're amazing. It's like this insane fruit. It's super easy to grow. It's incredible. And like I'd never heard of it till I dove into the permaculture world. And there's so many things that are incredible that you kind of have to go look for and figure it out, right? And so that's like, I'm only 2.5 years, 3 years into this journey. My goal though is to just keep going. Like I want to make it so my food is pure, natural, nurturing, no microplastics, no pesticides, none of that bullshit. I control it completely. And it's amazing, healthy food. Like for dinner, we're eating lamb that was raised on our ranch, that died on our ranch, that was processed on our ranch. And then for dessert, maybe like I make raw milk ice cream from literally 3 ranches down, right? Like and then we'll go get like some kiwis off the vine, and like that's our dinner.
And it's the best tasting.
Right. And we know where it all came from.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of the massive scandals, and there are a lot right now.
Yeah.
But one of the 3 biggest is how horribly toxic everything in the food supply is.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean the commercial industrial foods, everything. Dude, it's so much worse. It's so much worse than people know. Like, and I'm not even going to claim I'm an expert on it, but the people I talk to who are like, this is so bad. It's so bad you can't even imagine how bad it is.
What do you think? Because so I'm 24.
Right.
I don't have a lot of money. Like for example, I'm literally asking for half a cow, or I asked for half a cow from White Oak for my birthday.
Yeah.
So that's gonna.
I wouldn't buy meat from them.
Why not?
Bro, I love Will. I love everything they're doing at White Oak. They don't know what the fuck they're doing with meat.
Really?
I'm just gonna tell you. I told this to his daughters when I went on the lit. They got all fussy at me. They don't hang their meat. It drives me crazy because in every other way they're doing everything awesome, and I wish everyone would imitate them. They have their own processor on USDA processor on their land, which is great. Like they don't age their meat. It dies one day. They hang it for 24 hours to let it go through rigor mortis, and then they process it. That's so awful. It's like, I mean, awful in terms of it's not toxic. They're not polluting the meat. They're treating it great. It's just meat is designed to hang for at least 14 days. Probably 21 is ideal because you need to let it break down, let the enzymes break down. It helps make it more tender, flavorful. This is like a non-arguable thing. This isn't about government. I mean, like for as long as people have been eating meat, they've been hanging it, right? Like depending on the temperature, between 3 days and 3 weeks, right? If you have refrigeration, 3 weeks. If you don't, 3 days. They hang it for 24 hours. And like because I had the steak and I was like, this is not good. No, because I know meat.
Yeah.
Right. Like I went through the whole, like I processed we used to have cows, processed one with a mobile butcher. You know, they did the whole thing. Oh yeah, just wet age it. Doesn't work. It's garbage. Right. Their meat's not good. The meat's good.
Too late.
The way they process it, the way they process it ruins it. You've got to hang it. You've got to dry age it for 14 to 21 days, and they don't. And they won't listen. I don't know. Try their meat next to like any of the good processors around here. Like, Brett and Harry know a ton of them. Like literally just any of them. Pure Pastures or BSAC there's 20 that are awesome within an hour of Austin.
Yeah.
And they all hang it because you have to. Otherwise, it's too tough, especially with really good grass-fed meat. Yeah. You really have to hang that. That's
interesting. I kind of want to, because Jenny has become a good friend. I kind of want to ask her why they do that. Maybe it's some.
I'll tell you why. I went. They're used to giving tours to people who don't know what they're fucking talking about, right? I show up, I kind of know what I'm talking about, and so I started asking questions. And as you could tell, like the one, it wasn't her, it was the other daughter.
I haven't met the other daughter.
I can't remember her name. She didn't like my questions at all. They built their own processor, and they basically only have like a shipping container for storage, and so for cold storage. And so this was what she told me. They're doing so much meat, which is awesome because they're not just doing their own; they're doing others, right? Because once you have a processor, you need to do like a certain number of cows per day to make it economically efficient and stuff like that. And I'm like, why don't you just get 2 or 3 more colds? So, well, the economics of that and the price, and I'm like, your meat sucks because you're not hanging it. And I get it, like I understand, like they're in a tough spot, but like I have talked to a lot of people who like no food and don't order white oaks meat. They would love to. They ordered it. It doesn't taste good because it's not
I'll say
aged.
This. I've had some of their bone-in ribeyes, and I thought they were delicious, but I
put it next to aged meat.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That I mean, on your comment about the lamb that you butchered and all this stuff, I tell everybody this. I've been hunting since I was like 9 or 10, but
do you hang your deer? Do you process your own deer
for a little? Yeah. So
how long do you hang it?
Well, only like a day.
Yeah.
So
you don't know what you're doing.
To be fair enough, well, yeah, I'm an idiot. So yeah, that's fair enough.
Hold on.
But I was also butchering
people
it.
Can hang it.
But I butchered it in my garage in downtown Richmond, Virginia. So
yeah, you could totally butcher stuff in small.
Fair enough.
I mean, bro, like Comanches butchered their shit out on the plains.
That's
you
true.
Can butcher animals anywhere.
No, I mean, I say that I don't know. I don't know much about meat at all. I don't know much about butchering. What I was gonna say is that like the best meal I've ever had in my life, from a nourishment standpoint, and Dr. Bill Schindler, who I had on the podcast, talked about the difference between nutrition and nourishment.
Right.
The best meal I've ever had in my life. I killed my first and only deer with a bow. Field gutted it. I'd gutted before, but I'd never fully processed, and I'd never shot with a bow. So I killed it with a bow, gutted it, butchered it, cooked it. Nobody, not a single other person's hand touched that deer except for mine. And it was like the most magical meal I'd ever had. And so my question is like, do you feel that every day? Like every time you eat the lamb that's grown on your property, is that something that you get to just feel every day?
Dude, my son and I took, my son's 9, he shot his first deer this year. We took 32 deer this year off, we took 3 or 4 off our property, and then like 28 or whatever off a hunting lease I'm on. Yeah, dude, I cleaned all of them. I do.
But is it like my point was, or the question, like even the lamb, like that's obviously you're not hunting it, but you're raising, maybe even invested even more in that animal, the lamb.
It's right, because I'm raising it.
Yeah, exactly. You're raising.
No, you don't hunt sheep. That'd be pretty fucked up. But I do kill it like a halal style. Like I cut its throat.
Really?
Like it's a personal.
I was gonna ask how you do that.
Yeah, I mean like that's the most humane, quickest, most painless way is halal.
A lot of people would find that to be extremely gruesome. I mean, maybe because it is, honestly.
Because they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah.
They think food comes from a grocery store. Listen, man, I don't take the opinions of uninformed people. What weight would I give that?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't ask my doctor how to fix my car, do I?
Mm-hmm.
Why the fuck would I listen to somebody who thinks it's gruesome that you?
Well, no, I'm saying like I was saying like
that's where food comes from.
Yeah, I agree with you like that.
Right.
My uncle and my cousin have slit a deer's throat before, and they said it was incredibly. It was like a moving experience because that's a very intimate thing to be doing, and I agree with you. understand that that's the most.
A knife is extremely intimate. It's way different than a gun.
Yeah.
A gun
100%.
disconnects you from what you're doing. A knife, you're right there. You are putting part of you essentially into that animal and taking its life. It's no joke.
Have you? How old is your son? Is your 9-year-old the oldest?
Yeah.
Has he like been there for that? Is he?
Oh yeah.
Really?
He shot his deer. He gutted it. He skinned it. He did everything.
Did you do that type of stuff when you were growing up? Like,
no, I wish I had.
How do
That'd
you?
have been cool.
Yeah, 100%. Well, but knowing that now your son has those experiences, how does that feel as a father? That's probably pretty cool.
That's great. Yeah, of course. I mean, this is part of why I do it, is not just for me, but for him. And then my daughter, who's 7, loves coming too. And then I have a 4-year-old son who's super excited. Like, he's already asking about his first elk hunt. I'm like, bro, you're 4. Like chill out.
Chill out.
Right. Like, elk is a lot. So let's start with deer, maybe.
It's a little bit different, yeah.
Elk hunt's no joke. They're all very connected to their food. Like, we did meat chickens this year. We slaughtered and processed 100 meat birds. It took 2 days, just because we weren't super experienced this last year. And so, like, my son and daughter killed 100 chickens. Like, once I taught them how, and so my son slit the throats of literally 80 chickens, and like he loved it. Not like in a murderous, gruesome way. What he liked about it was like, oh, okay, like he helped raise the birds, move them. He knows, like, okay, this is our food. This is, they're part of our ranch. This is part of the cycle, and like, and he did it the right way, he loves being part of that process, and so does she. Like, my son and daughter love it. And then the other two, the 2-year-old and the 4-year-old,
they may be a little young.
I mean, yeah, they're young. They're around. They understand death is a part of life. It's not like a weird thing to them.
Well, you made the comment, people think food comes from a grocery store, and that's so true. And in today's world, we are so disassociated from our food supply. It's absolutely insane.
Who's we?
Other people.
Yeah, you're not talking about me.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. People at large, the Western society at large, because you think about a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old, like you brought up the Comanches in Texas, they were exposed to that from probably the day they were born.
That was their life.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no other life.
Mm-hmm.
There's no store.
And not even just the settlers in Texas that were living out here too. They were doing the exact same thing. So it's more of a return than it is.
That's how people have lived forever.
Yeah.
The we you're talking about are the weirdos.
Yeah.
Are the outliers.
That's a good point. There's this idea that like the average, I want to say the average like adult male or something, the average 35, 40-year-old male in America is overweight, less than like, I want to say like $10,000 in their savings or something, and either not in a successful relationship or divorced. And so the point that whoever I heard say this quote, I can't remember, but they were like, why would you want to be normal? Why would you want to be average? If that's the average outcome, why on God's green earth would you want to be a part of that we? And I appreciate you correcting my language. That's true. I certainly am more connected to my food than most. Not where I ultimately want to be, but it's definitely a vision. That's I just can't imagine how valuable that's going to be for your children.
I mean, it's. It's funny, man. I can already see like in fact, I have to go pick up when we're done. I got to go pick up my son, and he goes to this thing called Natureversity on Thursdays, and it's like this cool outdoor thing run by like people who like really know what they're doing, and I don't know how many. There's like 25 kids and these are kids who have parents who are like homeschooling their kids, right? Who want them outdoors. Who are like really like generally speaking very conscientious, trying to get their kids the best experiences, right? So these are like some of the best parents there are, and so many like there was one day where like you bring your parents. So I went with my son and we did cool stuff, and like of the 25 kids, like 20 of them were like, I don't know how to say this without sounding too harsh, like 20 of them were like spastic weirdos, right? And like, I mean, kids are kids, right? I don't really think about my kids in relation to other kids because I don't hang out with tons and tons of kids, and almost everyone out where we are in Dripping Springs is kind of like they live on land, they have some of their own animals, they like, so it's like not a weird thing.
Similar experience,
right?
Similar
it's
childhood.
Similar enough where they kind of have the same energy, and the kids have similar enough experiences, and most of our friends. most of their friends are the kids of our friends, and so they're like-minded enough. And I came to this and I'm like, Bishop, like, is this normal? And he's like, yeah, this is like how most of the kids here are. And it, like a kid with a sugar high, that kind of spastic. That's how they were all acting. And I was like, oh man, like, and I didn't even realize, like you say, oh, it must be great for the kids. And like, that's what it is. My kid's not one of them. My kids, I hesitate to use this word. I was about to say normal. That's not right. He's not normal by any stretch.
Yeah.
What he is all of them. But I'm just talking about the oldest one because he's centered and grounded and understands who he is and what he is and eats healthy. He lives a life that is very close to the idealized human life. At least it's possible, right?
Sure.
How many people live a life like that? I didn't until just a few years ago.
I would say a fraction of a fraction
Tiny,
of a percent.
especially in America, right? And so like, yeah, I can see the difference with like when lots of other kids are around, and these aren't bad kids.
Yeah.
These are not like delinquents and these are, most of these parents probably shop at Whole Foods. They probably try and buy good stuff for their kids. It's not like these are like the shitty kids.
Yeah.
You know, these are like solid kids from solid families whose parents are trying. It's like, wow, man.
It's
I know, like it
State of
is.
affairs.
Sometimes you don't realize until you actually see, like, oh man.
I think that's a result of the system that's been put in place, because most, as you mentioned, most people don't want the sovereignty or the responsibility of doing those types of things to be able to give their kids that type of life. So because of that, they are victims of the system, and the system is not set up for, I don't believe the system is set up for human beings to thrive. I think it's set up for human beings to be sort of guided into this cage.
It's a slave system that is invested everything it has into convincing you it's not.
The one thing you mentioned earlier, and I don't mean this to be cliche, so you talked about, like, you said you've never felt more like an idiot the last 2 years or so. Like, so that's how I describe my experience with jiu-jitsu, because like I said, I never wrestled.
That's everyone's experience with jiu-jitsu.
The dumbest, I say this all the time, dude, the dumbest I've ever felt in my life was the first time I walked into a jiu-jitsu class. I didn't know how to put my gi on. I didn't know what a tech stand was. I'm like, I don't know what to do with my hands. You ever seen that Ricky Bobby?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what to do with my hands. But that's such a powerful thing, because you need to be feeling that, right? And I think so many people shy away from that. That's why they choose the stability, because when you choose the sovereignty, you have to choose to feel stupid and to learn. And I'm curious if that, like, over the last 2 years, has there been like a particular thing that you felt the most dumb at, that you've like seen the most progress in, or like just anything in your life that sort of has surprised you in how proficient you've become?
Man, it's so funny, man. Like, my friends come out to they'll come out to the ranch, and they're all blown away, and they're like, bro, this is amazing. You've done all this in 2.5 years. And like, they're all like, impressed and amazed. And it, like, on one hand, I guess, cause I don't see it through their eyes, I'm the one living it and I'm the one doing it. And I'm like, oh yeah, that orchard looks great now. I know the 5,000 mistakes I made to get it to even the half decent thing it is now. And I'm like, you're just looking at it. You don't actually know what you're looking at. You don't know that that's in the wrong place and this and whatever, right? And so like, it's hard. Is there one? I mean, everything. Like the last 2.5 years have been okay. The worst was, this wasn't feeling the stupidest. The worst was, the house on the land was decent, but it was not, it was built in like the 90s or whatever. So we had to kind of gut it and rehab it. And we lived in it when we were rehabbing it, which was the worst experience of my marriage. Like, we almost got divorced, my wife and I. Not literally, but like it was
tough.
Oh, dude, it was the worst.
Lesson in there.
My friend of mine's a divorce attorney, and she's like, oh yeah, we call that divorce dust. I'm like, you couldn't told me this ahead of time? Like, it was the worst. That was horrible. Don't live anything you're rehabbing. It was the worst. And then I don't know, dude. It all, when you get to a certain age, I think as a man especially, and you're good at something, right? I'm good at a few things, really good at a few things, one of the best in the world at a couple things. You get into an area where you're like, you're not just not good, but you're you're useless level. Like I couldn't have gotten hired as a day laborer on a construction crew when I started. I'm not sure. Maybe I could get hired as an unpaid intern now.
Yeah.
But because I know what an impact driver is, right? And I could not have gotten hired 2.5 years ago. I was that bad, and so it was like everything was so challenging because it's like I didn't even know where to start. Like you said, like I didn't know what to do with I didn't know anything. And then it's like, I don't even know, for a lot of these things, I didn't even know where to start researching, right? Like, I didn't even know where to begin learning. The only reason I made it is because I had land and I had to do something. Well, I didn't have to do something. I mean, there's a lot of people I know who have land who don't. It's funny. I know a bunch of people who came out from California, bought stuff, tried to do this, and then like I don't want to say failed, basically quit and moved back to California. I'm like, good for you. That's where you belong. But I was like, all right, I have to make this work. Like if I want to be out here, and I did, and I want to have control over my own life and be able to make my own choices and provide the life that I wanted as a kid or something close for my kids and what they want, then I've got to figure this out. This is it, you know? And now, it's not like I was the first dude to ever figure out carpentry. Like there's a lot of for everything I'm following people who've already done it, which makes it way easier. Mm-hmm. Like if I was trying to do something no one else had done, that's a little different. But usually if you're doing something no one else has done, it's in a field where you're an expert and you're expanding the field. Mm-hmm. I knew, okay, idiots have learned this. I can learn it.
Yeah.
I just have to be willing to feel like an idiot for a while. And I didn't, it's not like that's pleasant, but the alternate is way worse. And so I'm like, okay, this is feeling like an idiot is the price I need to pay to develop the skills to have the life I want. Then I'll just pay it. Right. And so there isn't one, maybe the worst was, I was digging a T-post or digging a hole for a T-post or pounding in a T-post and I hit a PVC pipe, like an irrigation pipe. Because I didn't lay the system, it was already there, and it like geyser, and like for whatever reason this is at least a year and a half ago. I had it in my head that like working PVC was really hard. It's like the easiest shit on earth, right? It's like easier than Legos. Yeah. But I didn't know that at the time. I just for whatever reason I thought it was hard, and so like I panicked a little, and like I think I didn't even know how to turn off the irrigation water at the time, the well pump. Because like when the plumber had come, he showed my wife, but she never showed me. And so like I was like running around like a chicken with my head cut off for a while.
Just having a geyser.
Oh, dude, it was terrible. It was bad, dude. And like, yeah, like fuck water going everywhere and the chickens is like squawking, like actual literal chickens running around squawking. And so I call my wife and she's like, it's just the little valve on the thing next to the pump. And I'm like, where's the pump? And she's like, what are you talking about? You know where? And so found it, turned it off. And then like I watched in a field mud all over my, like pull up phone and watch a YouTube video on PVC. Like really with a feeling in my gut, like this is going to be harder than calculus.
Yeah.
And then I'll never forget. It was like a 5-minute video on how to change a PVC pipe. And I was like, I remember sitting there thinking, the stupidest part of me is thinking that this was going to be hard. Yeah. Like, what the fuck is wrong with me?
That's also one thing about that is the beauty of YouTube. There's a joke like YouTube University.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And well, on that note, I think the reason I think that is cool to me is like this podcast is called the Tyro Experience. Right. Tyro means novice or beginner. Uh-huh. And so that's
my last 2.5 years, dude.
Which is so cool to hear. Yeah. That's legitimately my mission and goal. Is the reason I named it that is because I felt and feel like a Tyro in so many areas, a novice, a beginner, in so many ways. And I'm like,
yeah, but the goal is to get out of that.
Exactly. Well, I want to talk to people who are in it or have made it to the next level and then be like, oh, well,
Yeah.
what did you learn? What are the principles and all these things?
Yeah.
So I think it's super cool because I don't know how old you are.
48.
48. So you're this, because this is one of my things. I want to die a Tyro in some ways. I never want to get to the point where I'm
There's
like,
always new things to learn.
exactly.
For sure.
There's the
And new levels of what you already know well.
exactly. And so it's cool because, like I mentioned, I see a lot of older men that I know or know of, or
They've stopped. They've
stopped.
calcified.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one thing that, like, my dad, for example, he was 57. We walked into our Jiu Jitsu class, this first Jiu Jitsu class, same day.
Yeah.
So it's like, I love seeing older men take the initiative to feel like an idiot, because you have this ego when you get old and you're like, oh, well, I can't look like an idiot. I'm 55 years old, or I'm 50 years old. And it's like, dude, that's like the other side of that is life, you know, well, at least from my perspective.
I'm a big believer that you're either growing or you're dying. There's no stasis in nature. That's you're either growing or you're dying. Yeah. So like, obviously, I would prefer easy, smooth growth where I didn't feel like an idiot. There's not a lot of that around,
Yeah.
and if you're getting that, it's probably not substantive growth usually. So it's like, okay, like I gotta feel dumb sometimes. Then that's just it. And then also, but you really want to dive deep, man. Like, I mean, I don't have to feel dumb in a certain ways. That's my own internalized shame and judgmentalness and other things, you know? Like, no, most people, when they look at what I'm doing, aren't like, you didn't know how to do that, you're stupid. It's like, oh, that's so cool that you learned. Oh, now you know how. Look at this cool thing that you've built, etc. Like that. I mean, I know plenty of people who don't like, who approach this stuff without that baggage, right? Or approach whatever they're learning without baggage, right? So yeah, like, I mean, it's kind of funny to think about, like, but on the other hand, my learning has I've gotten faster at learning over the last 2.5 years because I think I've gotten past that. Like, there were a lot of things that I don't think I walked my land for like 4 months after I got there. Like, really, and we have 50 acres, which is not a huge amount, but it's enough where, right, you can't see it all from one spot. Like, you got to walk it, right? And you can't understand land, even very simple. You think, oh, this is just a field. It's way more complex than that. An open field has all kinds of complexity to it that you would never understand if you don't get into it. And then you start talking about wooded areas and hills and creek beds, and it's a whole different game. And it took me 4 months to walk my land. And I remember thinking, what the hell's wrong with, like, what am I? Because I was overwhelmed, didn't know where to start, so I didn't, right? That's all my own baggage, you know? Like, I can just start. What I do now or what I try to do is I go look for someone. Okay, is there anyone who knows this that can explain to me how to think about it and where to begin? And most fields don't have that. Most fields do not have someone who really, truly understands it and knows how to talk to beginners. It's very rare. Like, I found that dude for guns. His name is Clay Martin, and
Is he in Austin?
No. He'll come down here every now and then to train people. He lives in like Oklahoma. He wrote a book called Concrete Jungle and Prairie Fire, and they're awesome. And it's he was in special forces for 20 years, which makes sense because like the job of Green Berets is to train like partisans in other countries.
Force multiplier.
Right. So he's amazing at that. So like I went from basically a FUD with guns to like a badass for civilians.
Yeah.
Not, no one's drafting me into the SEALs or some shit. But I'm a good shooter for a civilian in no time at all, because I had a dude who understood how to meet me where I was and bring me forward fast, right? And knew all the nooks and crannies and crap. Like I'm that with books and memoir especially. Like, I can take someone from I want to write a memoir, but I don't know where to start, to a badass writer in a very short period of time if they are just willing to listen and do even half of what I tell them. They're going to do great. Most fields don't have that, right? And so, and when you're like homesteading, which is like it's basically what I was doing, kind of like I wasn't trying to make money off the homestead, but we're straight up homesteading.
Yeah.
And so there's sheep, there's fencing, there's woodworking, there's irrigation, there's a million skills. Maybe 10% of those have someone who knows how to meet you where you are,
Yeah.
right? So the only other way to bridge that gap is, if that person doesn't exist, is to dive in and just start understanding you're going to make mistakes, being okay with that, and not judgmental, and not like, let that baggage go. That's what I've had to learn how to do, and be okay with not just feeling stupid, but with mistakes, right? As long as you understand, okay, let's start small. You know, like if you want to learn gardening, you don't put in, a 3-acre garden, right? What you do is you put in a garden bed, and even one of the ones with like the bricks that are movable, right? And then you just start and you plant. That's what I did with gardening last year. We put in like 3 raised beds, and then like we kind of had a crappy garden, tested a bunch of stuff. I learned a ton. And then this year I thought I was going to put in 1 orchard. I ended up putting in 3, and they're awesome. They're great, man. Like one of them's already going because we got mature trees, and the other 2 are going to be awesome. And so like, that's really all learning for me required. Yeah, you don't really have to be that smart. Finding the right people to listen to, and if you can't, get started the smallest scale possible, and be okay with constantly iterating, making mistakes, etc. And the more I've let go of any judgment or shame around that, the easier it is.
Yeah.
You know?
I went to Jordan Peterson live on Tuesday, and he said something. He said, "It doesn't matter where you start; it matters that you start." And I think that's so true, because there's another quote I'm reminded of by a performance coach we had in college that said, "It's the start that stops most people." And I think what happens, at least in my life, from what I experience in different things, is like I've built up these walls, or like these sort of these imaginative barriers. I'm like, oh, well, I can't do that because
PVC's hard.
Yeah, exactly. So
then I'm not you have to be a badass plumber to PVC. Yeah. That was some fucking mystical nonsense in my head.
All you have to do is start, and you're like, oh wait,
this is easy.
Yeah. So I feel like there's so many more things like that. Obviously, there are things that are difficult, but it's like a justification to not start, because when you start, you're
gonna make
confronting
mistakes.
the fact that you're gonna be a damn idiot. It's
But even that is a judgment.
It's true.
Like, okay, my 9-year-old, when he starts learning a new skill and he's not good at it, do you think I go, look, you're an idiot? Not in a million years.
I was about to say, if you did, then that'd be pretty.
It would be so fucked up that it's funny, right? But like, no, dude, like it wouldn't even occur to me to criticize a child starting, learning how to play chess and not being good. Like it wouldn't even occur to me to.
I'm trying to imagine now. You just like.
Right.
Something.
Bishop to rook 6. What kind of an idiot are you? Like, no, of course not.
That's
like
point.
a Saturday Night Live skit.
Yeah.
You know that one with Peyton Manning where he's like playing football with the kids and
get your head out of your ass.
Catch the ball.
No, that's hilarious. And he puts the kid in the porta potty.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I've never really thought about that. In terms of like returning to the childlike, not innocence, but the guiltlessness that a child feels. Oh, I've never done this before, so why would I expect to be? That's actually something. When I was starting a podcast, number one, and this is going to be like my 70th or something episode, but that was another thing. I'm like, well, I've never done that before, and it kind of was freeing, because I'm like, oh, well, like I shouldn't expect I've literally never done it before.
Huh.
I shouldn't expect myself to be so fantastic at it, and that is freeing to sort of drop that fear of being an idiot, One thing that Rogan always says, and me and my brother always joke for so long, he always, not always, but he like refers to himself as a moron in certain aspects. And I legitimately think that's, you could say it's like negative programming or whatever, but I tend to believe that it's kind of freeing in that way. Because if you're like totally cool with understanding you're going to be a moron in certain aspects, then you get to just start and not be so ashamed.
Yeah, I mean, like, I get it. The evolved version of that is to not even label it. I just don't know. Which I'm not fully at the evolved version either. So I'm not trying to. But I think I'm getting to the point now where I don't even think about it anymore. Because I guess after 2.5 years of it, I've finally gotten past whatever issues I had with it. And the next phase of my life, well, I just started a memoir coaching thing, which I'm great at memoir already. That was a skill of mine. But I'm even getting better at teaching that. But like, there's another thing that I'm going to start. It'll be a few years, but like I already know I want to do it, and it's a field I don't know. And so now like I'm doing like starting to learn the field. And it's like it's kind of cool because it's like, oh, I don't have to I'm not it's it's freeing because like I've finally learned how to let go, or I'm learning how to let go of all the judgments and the assumptions, and I didn't know, I'm an idiot because I don't know, I'm more. But then also what's cool about it is that now I can come to it fresh, and like I can see connections that other people aren't seeing. Whereas like in woodworking, I'm not finding things that other woodworkers haven't found, you know, nothing against me, but there's just a lot of people who've been doing woodworking for a long time. And like, I'm just happy to get proficient at it. There's nothing in homesteading, I don't think, that I'm finding where I'm like, I discovered. No. I'm following in the footsteps of skilled people, and that's cool. I'm good with that. But like, the next thing, I'm 100% with you. It's freeing, but what I'm finding, and the thing for me, the more I let go of those judgments and the labels, the easier it becomes.
It's even more freeing.
Yeah. Well, then you don't have anything to be free of anymore. You understand? It's like, oh, I'm free of this law. Well, it's like if you're not under the jurisdiction of that law, you don't have to be free of it. Same thing with like, I'm free of the label. Just don't adopt the label.
It's a non-factor at that point. How did you like thinking about labels? Just kind of came to mind. So you went from like the frat tire scene. And now you're doing this homesteading stuff. I'm certain that you had friends in that period of your life, and you have friends now.
No overlap.
Really?
Zero.
Have you had what was like the reaction? I don't know. I mean, what was the general consensus when you're like, hey, yeah, we're gonna go homestead in Dripping Spring, and I don't even have a screwdriver? Like, what was like the reaction?
One of the cool things about being me, but you don't get to be someone like me if you worry about the opinions of others a lot.
Yeah.
That's one of those things where most people, I think, if they're not very concerned about the opinions of others, they'll go even further and literally what they think, the way a lot of people think is, maybe even most people, is they don't think about is it true or not. They think, what's the social cost of me believing this, right? Like, and you saw it. Like, if you didn't believe that pre-COVID, and you're at all awake now, and you're like, oh yeah. That's the way I think most people, or at least a lot of people, think. It's hard for me to even model that. Like, to think, oh well, if I go homesteading, what will people think? It's like, it doesn't even fucking occur to me.
Yeah.
Like,
has it always been that way? Like, do you think even as a kid?
So, I had really shitty parents who didn't care about me. And I always say they gave me two gifts. My name, Tucker Max is my real name. It's a pretty badass name. And the other gift was they didn't pretend to care, right? Like, I know a lot of people who had parents who were shitty parents, but like, they pretended to be good parents and they wanted their child to think they were good parents. They needed the label of good parents. They were that kind of narcissist. My parents were deeply narcissistic boomers, but they didn't care about the label of good parent. And they didn't really pretend they cared that much. So one of the benefits of that is I never had to play that game with anybody or,
pretend that you care.
Yeah. Like I never had to worry about what my mom and dad thought because they just weren't in my life very much, And so that's just been my default setting. I never had to worry about what anyone thought. And so as I grew up, it was like, bro, it wasn't even until, I'm not sure when, man, it was well into my 20s before I realized that's how most people think. Is they're very concerned, at least about what of course I care about what my wife thinks and kids, but even then, like, if I'm assessing the reality or truth of something, what someone else thinks is not even a fucking consideration for me. Now, if you're thinking politically, strategically down the line, okay, modeling other people's minds is an important skill to have. I get it. And at some point that comes in. But, you know, is this ground good to plant trees? Is not like someone else's opinion doesn't. Now, an expert's assessment of the facts is maybe something I will take into consideration, especially if I don't have their expertise, but I'm going to want to know, well, why do you think that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because of X, Y, Z. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Or no, you don't know what you're talking about. You know, like I can't tell you how many permaculture experts I've talked to who really understand zone 10. We're in zone 8. They don't know fucking shit. USDA zones, which is about temperature and stuff. They don't know fucking shit about zone 8. And everything totally they say is wrong for zone 8. Happens all the time. Right? And I know this because, well, why do you think that? Well, this. I'm like, motherfucker, you get 60 inches of rain a year. That's great where you are. We're in Texas. Well, oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, I know you hadn't thought about that, shithead. So, like it's a whole... I just don't think that way. I never have. It's been... You can't be the Tucker Max I was if you're concerned what... Like, so much of what people loved about me was something that I wasn't trying to do.
You mean like in... Like the... You think that...
Not giving a fuck.
Like through the stories and stuff?
Not giving a fuck about what people I don't know or care about think about me. And even further... I mean, there were plenty of people who were powerful, who had impact on my life, who didn't like me. And I was like, fuck you, I don't care. Being willing to pay the price for what I believed, for holding a certain opinion, for acting a certain way, I've always been willing to do that. And that is, which doesn't occur to me as like some revolutionary, like, almost everyone who's I've ever met who's really good at something, their thought is like, why is this so hard for everyone else? Like they can't, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
well, that's why I think a lot of the best, like you see like the best baseball players, for example, since that's my life, the best baseball players are often not the best coaches.
Yeah, right.
Because it's like, what do you mean you can't hit a, what do you mean you can't hit a slider? Yeah. What do you mean?
They don't have to think about you're right. Like the best managers were usually shitty players.
Yeah.
Who they had to understand the game to be able to compete with dudes who were good naturally. Mm-hmm. Totally. 100%. Magic Johnson was a horrible basketball coach. Like the worst. So like Jordan couldn't even coach. Like he broke his play. Like Kwame Brown, that poor dude, like he broke him mentally. I think the dude left America. Like, no, I get it. So what people thought has never been a thing. It's just not a thing that's a consideration.
I was reading the Doomer Optimism piece that you wrote, and pretty early on in it, you talk about, I guess you went on like the Doomer Optimism podcast or something, and you said the post or something got like less engagement publicly, but you got
tons
DMs. So it's sort of that same deal because it's, and you talk about the COVID ideology and all that. You're like, people align with it, but they're like, hey, what's up with this? Like, it's not like, people are afraid to do that. I wonder, why do you think that is?
Because most people, like I just said,
well, like, why do you think they're afraid, is Michael? Like, if they are, yes, but like, why do you think that they are?
Because there are consequences. There are real consequences. You can look at my life and see, just as one example. There's plenty of other people who've lived lives running against the herd. Like I'm not the only one, but I'm the only one who lived my life, and I'm the only, and I lived it and I remember it. But you can look at my life as a very clear example of the price you pay for being willing to deviate from consensus or norm, even a little. Like I don't feel like I've deviated all that much. Although most people are like, dude, you're always marching the beat. You're way over there. And I'm like, okay. I mean, like, it doesn't feel that way to me. But also because, like, I don't fucking care like, it wouldn't occur to me to care what most people think. Like, it just doesn't, like, it's just not a thing that matters, right? And most people, though, I think they had parents who cared very deeply what other people thought. And they at least internalized that, if not fully adopted that worldview. And so it's like the default state for them, is to be hyper vigilant of the thoughts, opinions of others. Like I said earlier, this is like a pretty radical thing, and most people don't like it when I say it, or they get upset or whatever. But the reality is, the average mindset in America is a slave mindset. It just is. Like, oh, we live in the freest society in the world. That might be true. Doesn't mean it's not a slave society, right? And I think it is at its core.
Just the chains are a little bit more ambiguous.
No, the chains aren't ambiguous. People have just believed the lie that they don't have chains on. I don't think the chains are that ambiguous. In fact, if you actually look at the facts, English during the Middle Ages, so roughly 1100 to 1600, English peasants, serfs. Actually, let's go 11 to 1400, pre-Black Death, right? Serfs, slave, not quite slaves, but definitely not free men.
Yeah.
Right. I think they had 150 vacation days, or 175 like scheduled holidays every single year. They worked about half the year. How many days does the average person work? 5 out of 7.
Yeah.
Right? So they would be off 3 or 4. Average serf 8, way better, right? Like raw milk, meat, like like if you actually look at their life versus, someone like, let's just say average, let's take $150,000, middle manager at Salesforce life. You actually look at the day-to-day life, look at the caloric intake, look at the what they could and could not do. It's a serious debate who has more freedom. I would probably make the argument, most people I think would, although differing minds can differ, because middle-aged serfs serfs in the Middle Ages weren't going to Greece for vacation or something, right? So there's differences. But you can make a really strong case the better life was, a landed peasant, or a peasant in 1250 in England, right? A freer life, not just a better life, an actual freer life, right? And that's just one example. You can go through, the Spartans, right? They had they were full-time warriors because there were a class of people called helots that were slaves that supported them. Whenever the Spartans would tax the helots more than 20 or 25%, the helots would revolt. The slaves paid less tax than you do.
Yeah.
The slaves.
And they would revolt against the warriors. Interesting. How do you think?
You go down, the history is littered with examples, right? And in fact, if you look at what what America's founders said they were revolting against, they literally rioted and threw the equivalent of millions of dollars of tea in the harbor over a 3% excise tax on imports. What are you paying sales tax?
That's a really good point.
Everything, go read the Federalist Papers or the actual documents, the Declaration of Independence, etc. Everything that you sit by and blithely accept is way worse than what those men revolted against the most powerful empire in history and won for.
What do you think
So what, you want to talk about a free society or a slave society?
Well, so for the people, for a person that's a part of that society that's not in the situation that you are, what do you say to them?
Well, hold on. What do you? That's a huge not in the situation you.
Well,
are.
no, not.
What do you mean?
No, not in the situation. Meaning, you have.
You think I just magicked my way to this?
Not even close. I'm saying the series of events in your life have led to that. The choices that you've made have allowed you to do that. Somebody that has not made those decisions yet, or has not started down that journey, or is that middle manager at Salesforce, what would you say to them to get out of there, to get out of that spot?
Well, the first question is, do you want out? I wouldn't say in it. What do you mean? What
if
would
they
I say?
came to you and said, hey, look, here's where I'm at. I don't necessarily love my life. I feel like I'm a high paid slave.
You are.
How do I get out of it? How do I not be this?
Great question. The first question is, do you want out? Yeah, of course I want out. Okay, great. Do you want to pay the price? You can get out. You always can get out. You always have a choice. The question is, do you want to pay the price? And in economics, there's a term called revealed preference. Don't listen to what people say. Watch what they do. If someone says they eat healthy and then they go to McDonald's 5 times a week, the revealed preference is they don't actually want to eat healthy. They want to eat McDonald's, right? Bro, I have so many friends who are essentially in that situation, right? Who've seen me, not just the last 3 years. I mean, because listen, it's not like I'm, I didn't start my own nation. I'm not some perfectly sovereign, enlightened being, right? I'm on a journey too. But they'll see me much further along on a journey that they think they want to be on. And then they'll come out to the place, have dinner. How'd you do this? Blah, blah, blah. They don't really normally ask that question. That actually, even to ask that question means you're pretty far down the line.
On the journey? You mean?
Yeah. If you say, how'd you do this? Or how can I do this? That's actually, to me, that's a good sign that you actually want to do it. Because what most people do in that situation is they'll come, who are friends of mine, they'll come out, they'll have dinner, and then they'll start telling me why they could never do this. I'm like, why are you telling me? You're not talking to me, dude. You're talking to yourself, right? Because I don't have the type of friends who would put me. A lot of people are like, oh, my friends put it down or what. I mean, I have the friends who would put my shit down. I'm not friends with. They're not in my life. But the ones who are good enough people that I want them in my life, the reason they're not in my situation or their equivalent is they tell themselves it's not possible for them. And so what would I say to them? Nothing. I used to be this type, oh yeah, you can do this. Bro, that's all bullshit. That was me and my own insecurity and me trying to deflect from my work, right? I don't try to convince anyone of anything anymore. But if someone actually comes to me and says, hey, I want this, my version of this, how do I get it? That's 80% of the way. You're so far along the way, dude. I mean, you're assuming maybe just because you are that type of person who does want that and you're on that journey, most people are not there. They're not even at the place they would ask that question. To ask that question means at some level of your consciousness, you have recognized your desire for it. And most people won't. They'd even have the desire, won't recognize it. Most people, I think, have given up on it. But even the ones who haven't given up won't recognize to themselves they have the desire. Because if they do, then they kind of have to face whether they're going to go for it or not. It
also seems to me that recognizing that, especially after a certain amount of time living in a certain set of circumstances, it kind of, you're faced with admitting that the last however many years that you've lived in that circumstance have been a part of that slavery that you're talking about. If that makes sense. But nobody wants to do that. Not nobody, but a lot of people
you're
don't.
right. It's a hard thing to let go of an old identity. Truly, bro, that was. I mean, we went through that as a society in 2020 and 2021. And what's so funny though, man, is now in 24, all the data's out that everything me and a bunch of other people were saying in 2020 and 2021 about how the whole thing was a fraud. It's all bullshit. Don't fucking get vaccinated. It's all true. You get all the data's out. Even the CDC, they restart Friday afternoon, redacted. It's all there. Yeah. And there's still a bunch of people who it's the groups that bought it. There's kind of there's maybe 3 groups. There's a tiny fraction of people who came over late and will admit, fuck, I was wrong. That's tiny. There's very few of those. Most people ignore it or pretend like literally like that didn't. It's almost like, bro, it's crazy to talk to people like, oh no, I wasn't that. I'm like, motherfucker, you were telling me I was a horrible person killing Granny because I wasn't.
You're getting
like
fired.
No, like no, I didn't say that. You got that? Did you get vaccinated? Well, I mean, only the first shot. You did. Yeah. So shit, you bought it. Stop. Just admit the truth. Yeah. I'm not even trying to shame you. Just, or there's the type who just literally are like, still. I mean, like, bro. We still see them. The people alone in their cars wearing masks. There was a woman yesterday. I saw
today wearing a mask.
No. This is crazy. This is next level. I wouldn't, if you had told me you saw this, I would have called bullshit on you, but I saw it. It's true. She was in her car alone with a mask, and I swear to God, the mask was pulled down and smoking a cigarette. I swear to fucking God. I pulled my phone. I didn't get a picture because it was like she was, I should have fucking followed her and gotten a picture because like that's the most unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, so one thing that
Think about how brainwashed you have to be.
Do you think it, because I thought about this before, is there any efficacy to like wearing those for pollen or something? Because I'm trying to justify a little bit. Maybe she's not.
No, stop.
You don't think that she's allergic to pollen?
Did you ever see a mask on anyone before the COVID? Okay, then stop.
That's just the
Claritin's like $10 for 100 pills if you got pollen problems. Stop. No, dude, that's to ask how you do it means you're really far along. And that's a great sign if you want to do it. But still, my questions would be, are you sure? And at that point, if you're asking, you're probably sure. And then the question is, do you want to pay the price? And I can tell you that it's hard. And the price is not money. Everyone thinks, not everyone, young people usually think the price is money. Money helps. Money does. What money enables is it enables you to go faster, to make more mistakes, to be sloppier. Like I've been able to make a lot of really stupid, costly mistakes, and it's like okay because I have a money buffer that like if you were trying to homestead and you'd done it my way, you would have ruined yourself. Seriously, it'd have been bad, man. But like that's really all money allows, right? You don't need money to be sovereign, to be free. Money just helps a lot, and it makes it fast. But and then also, by the way, there's tons of ways to make money. Like that's money. If you think money's the obstacle, that's the story you're telling yourself, so you don't have to start. Right? In fact, that's true with everything, but money seems to be the obstacle that I see a lot of people get stuck on.
It's like the biggest barrier you see.
It's a barrier that most people think is convince themselves is the thing stopping them.
On that note, I actually don't think I've ever heard you speak about this. Maybe I just haven't listened enough. But what's your thoughts on like Bitcoin and that whole side of things?
No, I did Marty Bent's podcast. I talked all about this on that podcast. Yeah, because like otherwise, why would you ask me about Bitcoin?
Yeah. I'm just like curious. Just your take on the whole sovereignty aspect of it.
I mean, I'll tell you what I said and why he kind of asked me on the podcast. Like, I love the idea of Bitcoin. I hope it works. I get all the arguments for it. I'm with the Bitcoiners in terms of the logical progression of the arguments. I see what they're saying. They're not wrong. But I keep coming back to, and none of them had ever been able to answer this. What do you do when the men with guns show up and take your shit? And like, you can't ban math. I'm like, stop. When the G20 decides in unison to ban Bitcoin, I understand what you're talking about. They can't, just like you can't ban cocaine. I get it. I'm like, and Marty admitted, I'm like, what happens to the price? Oh, he's like, it probably goes down 90%. I'm like, Marty, 98%. Right. Okay. What happens then? You know, like, what do you do? Because here, bro, the people, Marty's been in finance long enough. And so like when we talk, you can see the podcast. When we talked about it, man, like he understood what I was talking about. You get to high enough levels of any powerful organization or arena, banking, like finance, politics, government, Hollywood, and even, you know, certain businesses, whatever, you're not going to find any good guys. Maybe relative, but there's no good guys. And people who become very powerful in industries and arenas that give them a lot of power over others, it tends to attract the worst kind of sociopaths. Those people aren't giving up their power. They're just not. You know, you can take power, you can take your power from them, or you can take their power from them, maybe, but they're not giving it up. And the core assumption that the Bitcoin community, at least most of the members of the Bitcoin community have, is that better arguments win. History tells you that's not true. Better arguments don't always win. Sometimes force of arms win. And the hard reality is the US dollar still has an army behind it. So does the Chinese yuan and go down the list. Bitcoin doesn't. And you're right, you can't ban math. But you can blow up servers and you can imprison Bitcoiners and you can imprison people who run exchanges and you might not be able to destroy the truth, but you can bury it deep enough that it doesn't reach many people. And so I own a little bit of Bitcoin and I hope they win. Because if they win, like the joke Bitcoin solves this, like they're mostly right. The problem is because Bitcoin solves the ability for sociopaths to rule other people.
What do you do in the meantime?
What universe do you think these people are going to give that power up meekly? Like, bro, that's not how it works. That's never how it's worked. There's going to be a fight. And not like an intellectual fight and a debate. Like, the men with guns are going to show up, or worse, right? And I am hopeful. I'm not betting on that as the exit strategy.
I've never heard that argument before, but it makes sense. The
Bitcoiners don't make it. They don't understand it. The best counter argument, the best one, is Bitcoin could be adopted by rogue nations as a way to fight the U.S. and the SWIFT system. Great argument. Doesn't really, when you actually dive into logistics of it, rogue nations tend to be even more authoritative. Like, you tell me North Korea and Iran and Syria are going to be the proponents of true autonomous money. Get the fuck out of here. That's not going to happen, right?
Well, so how do you view like the fiat currency? How do you view because?
Oh, listen, the Bitcoin critique of fiat currency is, I don't think I disagree with any aspect. It's right. It's correct. Yeah.
So do you view it as more of just like it is what it is at this point? Like, you just have to play the game to win the game, in terms of like the dollar?
You don't have to do anything, right? Like, I have a couple friends who exist in this like Tom Bombadil esque like world where they kind of, they're not criminals, but they don't really exist in the system, you know, like Lord of the Rings, Tom Bombadil, like that dude. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I've never seen Lord of the Rings.
He's not in the movie. It's in the book. It's actually a good book. I would read it just because it's basically a part of the Western canon. It's like, it's not quite at the level of reading the Bible, but it's close in terms of understanding the West. I've got friends that exist like that. You don't have to do anything. I've chosen, well, I honestly didn't quite understand until the last 5 to 8 years. But at this point, I've decided to, the best path to sovereignty for me is to understand that interacting with the system in certain ways makes sense. Like, I understand the legal game well enough that, like, okay, like, I'm going to play it like I'm not going to break the law. I'm not going to give the IRS any ammo to use against me. Listen, man, let me explain. I've said this on a couple podcasts, and it blows people's minds, and I never understand why, because it seems so obvious to me. There's nowhere on earth you can go right now where you aren't going to have to pay protection money to men with guns. The question is, who do you want to pay? Right? Like, but well, what if I get a boat? And okay, great. So you're going to have guns on that boat, and your protection money is going to be the crew on that boat. You better know those dudes. You know, like the world we live in. You've got to be able to either protect yourself or pay people to protect yourself, or both. And I think right now, it's why I live in America. There's a lot of people are like, oh yeah, expat. And I'm like, bro, there's what's coming. I don't think leaving America is going to make it any better. Right. And I'm talking about for me individually.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about, I'm trying to save America. No, I'm not trying to save America. Like, America's going to be what America's going to be. I'm going to make the best decisions for me and my family. And for sure, I think the best decision is to stay in America, because I don't think anywhere else is any safer. And
that's such a good point. I think it's often overlooked. Which
different sets of facts, different. Like, I could see a situation where I'm like, we need to get the fuck out of America. I think what's happening in the world is a worldwide thing, and I don't think there are any safe places. There are only safe people, right? Which hasn't been true for most of our lives. America was a safe place. It is no longer a safe place.
Do you think COVID was a turning point, or was it something before that?
No, it was before. COVID was just when I woke up and saw it. I'm not sure when it switched. I really don't. We could talk long. I'm not sure. But like, yeah, it was COVID was when I woke up and saw it. The point is, I'm willing to, I think long term, the best situation for me and my family is for me to essentially pay protection money in this. It's not just America. Like, I wouldn't live in Montana, right? For a couple different reasons. There's really only 2 or 3 states in America I'd live in. Texas is, I think, the best one for a lot of different reasons. And so, all right, I'll play a game as long as you're not too close to the border. I'll play the game in Texas. It is the choice, I think, that will get me the most sovereignty, and will set up my family. Because I'm not just thinking about me. Like the way I'm thinking, which is like a whole separate long discussion, is more like an economic clan, like a family clan.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how are we going to set this up? Both land and legal structures and company structures and trust structures, so that my kids and my grandkids, assuming that they, their lives are their own decision, they're going to have to take responsibility, and they're going to have to do their, but how can I set this up so I'm not only set, but so are they? If they decide to play that game, they're set up in a way that's really beneficial for them. And so, like, the only other real option for me, man, is like, all right, I can go to Malaysia and become a warlord. And it's like, man, and I'm only half joking.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I don't want to.
Not that life.
It's bro, it's like the only other good options. And I'm like, this is going to sound harsh, but I can really run down, because I have gone through deep this analysis. Lincoln, actually, who was a fucking shitty president in so many ways, but smart man in certain ways. As I would not be a slave, so I will not be a master. Almost any other option requires me to essentially become a master, And not literally, like, I'm not going to go get slaves, but I want to be in a system where I'm, as much as possible, interacting with other sovereign men instead of followers or employees, right? Which is really just a glorified slave in a lot of ways, which is a debate that not everyone agrees. This is a point not everyone agrees with, but and so I'm like, all right, I think still for right now, the situation we're in, playing the Western game in America with American legal structure still works, and it's harder and more complicated, but it's still doable for now.
Do you draw inspiration or learn or look into like American Indian heritage and stuff like that a lot?
Not really.
Because I feel like the
whole
idea of like a sovereign group of people is super akin to that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
In a way.
How'd they do?
Not very well, because the men with guns showed up. That's an interesting point. I've never really thought about the fact that it's like everybody's paying for that, because it's a reality of it. Yeah, dudes with guns show up. What are you gonna do
if you don't have your own dudes with guns?
Yeah,
and like meaning like at some point the meat's got to hit the meat.
Yeah.
If you cannot hold it, and I'm not making a moral argument. This is a very real. If you can't hold it, it's not yours.
Yeah.
Not in a moral sense, like if you and I are in the same tribe and I come take your shit and it's like, what the fuck, dude? Like we've agreed. That's a whole different thing. Just in a very nature red in tooth and claw sense, in a very realistic sense. If you cannot hold it, it is not yours. Like, well, I love first off, there's no such thing as Native American culture in America. Like that's a preposterous notion. Like the Cherokee were so different than the Comanche that like it's like saying, European culture. You're going to talk about the Finns the same way you talk about the Spanish. Like there's nothing, but there are so many elements of Native American culture and Indian culture in America that were great and awesome. And I get it. But like, how'd they do?
It's an interesting point. I've never really thought about it that way. I don't know. I just look at that lens. I look at a lot of things through that lens in terms of not even American Indians in general, but just like tribal. Like I think that we're really more or less wired to be tribal creatures in a way.
Oh, 100%.
And I think we're like we're doing away with that for better or worse. I don't know. I'm not smart enough.
The one thing that not all by any stretch cultures, but the Comanche actually, who in some ways were really fucking sociopathic and awful.
Yeah.
But them and several other tribes got right was they really did operate, whether they did this on purpose or not, they operated as sovereign individuals, but together in a group. So like a Comanche tribe existed because everyone, like the Mongols, every Kurlatani, they would have this essentially an election. And so like the various leaders would go to different spots. And like you voted by taking your yurt and your family to the spot of the leader you wanted to follow, right? And if you didn't want to follow that leader anymore, you just fucking left. In that regard, I'm all like, those ideas are great. That's not necessarily a realistic situation to build right now. Could you get in a situation like that? Yeah, possibly. But that's not like, how you going to do that in America right now today? I don't know. Maybe there's an answer. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah, it'd be pretty tough.
Right.
It'd be pretty tough.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, I know I got to go pick up
my kid. Yeah.
Right on. Well, I appreciate your time, Tucker. This has been awesome, man.
Of course.
I look forward to connecting again in the future, I hope. Maybe on the mats.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you come to Umata.
Do you go pretty regularly?
I go Tuesday, Thursday at noon.
Nice. And
then Saturdays at like the 11 to 12.
Very cool. Very well. Might see you there soon.
All right.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.